week 3 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few running backs I looked at off the wire this week. The first back, Carson Steel of the Kansas City Chiefs. And now, after that great victory towards the end of the ball game, Isaiah Pacheco went down in post-game. He was with crutches in a walking boot. And obviously, that's not a great sign. So Carson Steel available 98% of fantasy leagues. I know Samaje Perine is there as well for the Kansas City Chiefs team. But I think Carson Steel is going to be the lead back. We saw week 1, 2 carries, 3 yards. And then week 2 versus Cincinnati, he did get 7 carries, including a couple carries towards the end over Perine at the end of that ball game. So Carson Steel, he's going to get a workload. He was a big-time player in training camp, was the rookie. A lot of people like him there. And he was playing great, and they have a lot of respect for the rookie already, is Andy Reid and this whole Kansas City team. So I think Carson Steel is going to get opportunity for Kansas City. And this week, he's my number 1 waiver wire addition, especially, like I said, with Pacheco out. That's a backfield where Carson Steel, in between the tackles, is going to be physical. And I think Samaje Perine is going to be more of the receiving back and get some touches in between the tackles. Carson Steel available 98% of fantasy leagues. Next running back, Samaje Perine of the Kansas City Chiefs. If Pacheco's out, I still believe Perine's going to have a role. I don't believe the rookie Steel is just going to go out there and get 20, 25 touches per game for this Kansas City Chiefs team. So Perine right now available 96% of fantasy leagues. He's a running back that's had a lot of experience as a starter, as a backup. Cincinnati Bengal days, Washington Commander days going way back, and then last couple seasons with the Denver Broncos. And they brought him in case of something like this with the injury to Pacheco or whoever as good backup in emergency. And I believe him and Steele will man the backfield. But if I had to pick one, I think Steele will be the favorite for this Kansas City Chiefs team to get more touches and especially the goal line work. So right now, Perine available in 96% of fantasy leagues, and I would give him an ad this week. Back Brandin Allen of the New York Jets, big physical running back, 6'1", 235, backup to Breece Hall. But week 1, we didn't see much of Allen, but week 2, we broke out 7 carries, 33 rush yards, a touchdown and 2 catches, 23 yards and a receiving touchdown. So Allen could do a little bit of everything. And Breece Hall, he don't need to go out there, I believe, and get 25, 30 touches a game to be effective. So like I said, Brandin Allen, big physical running back. He could run in between the tackles. He could catch the football out of the backfield. And even if he's getting, let's say, 30, 35% touches as Allen, I think as a flex option down the line this season, he could be usable for fantasy owners. And this week, in a decent matchup versus the New England Patriots, where they've had trouble versus the run. We saw Zach Moss in week 1 run the football well and find the end zone. And then we saw week 2, Zach Charbonnet ran the football well and find the end zone. So I think Thursday night, quick turnaround, Brandin Allen in deeper leagues. If you need a flex option or if you got injuries at the running back position and you want to put him in there as your number 2 running back, I don't think it's a horrible option. If he's going to get 10, 12 touches per game as Allen, I think he could be effective in this offense, and he's available 91% of fantasy leagues. The next running back is Truba Hubbert of the Carolina Panthers. I know Hubbert, his ceiling isn't that high. He is a starting running back, and he's out there in 52% of fantasy leagues. So week 1, they didn't do much. Obviously, at the Saints, only 6 carries, 14 yards. But week 2, a solid ball game for Hubbert. Carries 64 yards, 4 catches, 12 yards in that one. So week 3 at the Raiders, it's a middle-of-the-pack matchup. I think this Raider defense has been all right so far in the early going, and they had the upset victory at the Baltimore Ravens. But Truba Hubbert's starting running back, and I believe in 12-team leagues or deeper, these starters got to be owned in 50% or more fantasy leagues. So if you need someone as a back-end number 2 option or flex with all these injuries and now bye weeks starting to come up, and Jonathan Brooks, we don't know for sure when he's coming back, I think Truba Hubbert could be a decent option, available with 52% of fantasy leagues. Next back's Rico Dowdle of the Dallas Cowboys. Rico Dowdle was the leading back in touches. He started off the game as the starting running back as well for the Dallas Cowboys, and he had a middle-of-the-pack ball game. Week 1, Zeke was the leader in the backfield, and Dowdle, he still had 8 carries, 26 yards in week 1, a catch for 6 yards. In week 2, 7 carries, 30 yards, 4 catches, 29 yards. So Dowdle, a better receiver out of the backfield than Ezekiel Elliott, a younger player as well. We know Ezekiel's best years are behind him. I know a tough matchup in week 3 for Rico Dowdle. I'm not saying he's someone you should pick up and put in the starting lineup, but definitely should pick him up and someone to put on your bench, available in 59% of fantasy leagues. And at any time you can find the running back that's getting decent work, and it just takes an injury or one breakout game for a back to get the role. That's the same thing with Brandin Allen. If Breece Hall goes down, Brandin Allen could be a top 15, 18 running back weekly. And if Zeke Elliott is out of the mix here for this Cowboy team, I think Dotto could be a flex option for fantasy owners. Next running back's Ty Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings. Another situation as well, if Aaron Jones goes down with injury, where we've known he's had injury problems the last few seasons. Ty Chandler is a solid running back, and we saw it the first couple weeks. He made some impact for this Viking team, and he's available in 71% of leagues. Week 1 at the Giants, 8 carries, 17 yards, 3 catches, 25 yards. And week 2, what a ball game versus a tough defense in the Niners. 10 carries, 82 yards, 8.2 yards per carry. Chandler, he could run in between the tackles. He could catch the football out of the backfield. And like I said, Aaron Jones, even if he does stay healthy, which I don't see it happening a full season this year, he's not going to get 25, 30 touches a game, where Ty Chandler is going to come in, get those 8 to 12 touches per game, and I think be pretty productive. So right now, as a flyer and someone who, if Aaron Jones goes down with injury, could be a top 20 option weekly, is Ty Chandler. I definitely would give him an ad this week. The next running back, Antonio Gibson of the New England Patriots. So far in the early going, Ramondre Stevenson's had a bounce-back season and looked good after they gave him the contract extension in the offseason, was this Patriot team. But more work Gibson got here in week 2, and he looked good. Week 1, he didn't do much, 7 carries, 18 yards. In week 2 versus the Seahawks in a grinded-out game, 12 touches in the ball game, 11 carries, 96 yards, and a catch for 7 yards. So week 3 at the New York Jets, it's a tough matchup. Obviously, even though the first 2 weeks of the season, Jordan Mason, he went off with a big game versus the New York Jets running the football. And Tony Pollard had a decent outing as well in week 2 versus the Jets. But we know this Patriots and Jet team, it's always physical matchups, always defensive tested, and it's going to be one in the trenches. So Antonio Gibson as a backup, and him and Stevenson, a decent 1-2 combo, I believe. Available right now in 84% of fantasy leagues. Next running back's DeAndre Foreman of the Cleveland Browns. Believe it or not, Foreman, he hit the starting lineup in week 2 for this Brown team. 14 carries, 42 yards, not effective on yards per carry, and 1 catch, 9 yards. And Jerome Ford still got a decent workload as well. But right now, this Cleveland Brown team, they want a physical running back in between the tackles. They know Deshaun Watson's obviously been struggling the last season and change, and has had the off-the-field issues as well. And DeAndre Foreman, he's that big running back that we've seen the last few seasons. Going back with Carolina when McCaffrey went down a couple years ago, he filled in and played decent football. And last season as well, Foreman at times, he had some good ball games for the Chicago Bears where they had injuries to Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson in the backfield. So Foreman, every season he's on a new team, but he finds a way to see the field, and we've seen some big games out of him and some games where he hasn't done much. But right now, as a speculative ad and someone who's getting carries until at least Nick Chubb returns, he's available in 99% of fantasy leagues. A few running backs I looked at off the wire for week 3 of the fantasy football season.